Hey everybody, today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on these three board games. We have Empire's End, we have Earth, and we have Footprints. But before I get started on my quick reviews of these games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. Okay, so let's start with Empire's End. This is by John Declare and illustrated by Kunchai Moria. It takes 45 to 60 minutes to play and accommodates 2 to 4 players. Now, generally speaking, I've not been a huge fan of any John Declare designs, but when I heard that he was making a larger strategy game all built around a mechanism made famous in a game called No Thanks, which is one of my favourite filler games of all time. And although I love that mechanism, I was a little bit skeptical if a more involved game could really be built off the foundation of such a simple idea, where each round something negative will come up for auction, if you want to put it that way, and you as the players are bidding not to take that particular punishment. And in this game, that punishment comes in the form of your city being burnt down. So each round, one of these buildings, depending on the row or the order in the row that your buildings sit in, one of those will be destroyed, set on fire, and you'll potentially be losing victory points. So you actually start this game with most of your victory points, and as the game progresses, you are losing them unless you can keep them alive, essentially. And you're going to do that by placing these tokens on these negative punishments, and as soon as you put a token down onto it, it'll go on to the next player where they can do the same. But the twist is that as people are bidding not to take these punishments, the kitty will build up to a point where the resources on that particular punishment are more inviting than taking the punishment itself. So, you are actually taking the resources and getting it for yourself. And in this game, unlike the original No Thanks, you don't just have one currency, you have 3 different types of tokens that you are using, which have their own uses in different phases of the game. So for example, you get these hammers that can be used to repair your building. So sometimes it has enough hammers on there where you can actually afford to just rebuild that building anyway. But bearing in mind that you only have a certain amount of opportunities to do that throughout the game, so you cannot take too many of them. Or you can even get these kind of war axes, which you're using in this kind of blind bidding system to get some bonus points. So I do like the fact that, you have more than one currency here that you need to consider. And of course, with everything you're giving away, you are putting on the lap of your opponent to use against you later, which could actually be used for something even worse for them or better for you. So you need to be careful about when you use these tokens. And sometimes you have to be prepared to take that punishment to avoid taking a worse one later on. And because as the game goes on, you actually have potential to move these tokens around in an order that suits you, because the actual positioning of these can matter based on adjacency bonuses. Sometimes you can take take the hit on a building that isn't worth too many points, but in your opponent's arrangement, it could be worth a hell of a lot of points to them. So I really do like that kind of multi-use system, and the way that you start the same, but you end up in completely different kind of positions. So yeah, definitely kind of mechanisms within mechanisms here, without being too confusing, I suppose. I suppose if there's any kind of criticism I have about this game, is that it can be a little bit repetitive. Because you are pretty much stopping doing the same thing, passing on these buildings or these punishments. But another thing that I do like about this, even if you do take a punishment and have to burn one of your buildings down, they do come with these little bonuses that you can tuck in beneath another building. So there is somewhat of a bittersweet decision you're making, because even though you're taking a punishment, you can get a kind of a reward by tucking it under another card, which can increase your engine to do other things, such as giving you more passing power, or giving you even end-game points or in-game points, or even like improving your economy by getting more resources. So yeah, lots of different things going on here based on the foundation of that simple mechanism. I generally like blind bidding mechanisms as well. As I mentioned, when it comes to that combat phase, you are blindly selecting a number of tokens in your hand. You're revealing them at the same time and potentially getting some bonus points. And of course, sometimes you could be overspending on that. Sometimes you could be underspending. So you need to be sure not to be wasting too many of those blind bids. So all in all, this game definitely worked for me. I thought it was a lot of fun. But again, I am a big fan of the original No Thanks Anyway, which is kind of a boiled down version of this game, which really gets to the crux of everything going on here. But it is, again, it's a game in its own right, but you can definitely see how it has been inspired by that original one. Now, another thing I would say from an objective standpoint, I think some players might find this game a little bit demoralizing and maybe a bit punishing at times because, again, you are starting with pretty much all of your points and you're getting battered from or throughout the duration of the game. Now, I personally like that because it makes the game feel different. But if you don't like that, or you want to have constant positive feedback, then this might not be the game for you. So, for example, if you don't like games like In the Year of the Dragon, you probably won't like this one either for that same reason. But apart from that, and again, apart from that, maybe a little bit of a repetition factor and maybe going on a few rounds too long, I think this is a really enjoyable and fun game that, again, uses that mechanism to a high standard and elevates it, really. While I still believe there is a place for the original No Thanks in the collection because it is such a pure filler game, this one, again, takes it to that kind of lightweight, medium lightweight Euro feel, but it still stays true to that one core mechanism with a few other things built on that foundation. So I can give this one a soft recommendation. I would give it a accommodation of around a 7 out of 10. Again, if you like that No Thanks mechanism, then I'm pretty sure you are going to like this one. Next up, let's talk about Earth by Maxime Tardif, published by Inside Up Games. This is a 1 to 5 player game that takes 45 to 90 minutes to play on average. And I'm certainly late to the party on this one. This was one of the colossal hits from 2023. It is a card-driven engine builder, this kind of tableau building style game, as you are building a grid of 16 cards, this 4x4 grid here. And all these cards work in different ways. You're trying to score as many points in a ton of different ways here. So this is definitely a point salad style game where you are given so many options, and unlike the aforementioned game Empire's End, this game is all about kind of positive feedback. No matter what you do in this game, it feels good because you're always getting drip fed points and actions. So we'll go into the cards in a bit, but what I do like about this game is the core mechanism where on your turn you'll choose one of 4 actions, which are all very simple in their own right, such as drawing and playing cards, taking more resources to play those cards in the first place, getting these kind of sprouts that you can put onto cards to get points, as well as getting growth or drawing cards, any kind of combination of those actions. But whenever you take an action, everybody else will get a slightly weaker version of that action. So if you're familiar with games like Puerto Rico, like Race for the Galaxy, then this game has that in spades. And I really do like that mechanism, and it adds a lot of player engagement into the game, where even if it's not your turn, you get to do stuff. And following on from that, what I love about this is that because you can see all these actions are color-coded, whenever you take that specific colored action, all of the cards in your existing tableau with that color signature on it will be triggered. So as the game goes on, you can imagine you're taking longer and more grandiose turns, getting more and more bang for your buck. Now, what I do like about this game as well is this kind of struggle of keeping everything balanced, because, again, even if when it's not your turn, you're getting stuff, you want to be making sure that you have that room to expand into. For example, as I said, if you're getting these sprout tokens, which are essentially just points, you need to have empty slots on your cards in order to take those sprouts or risk losing them. So you want to be as efficient as you can and be making sure that you are, stocking up at every opportunity you can, because every sprout is going to be worth a point. You do have this multi-use card system as well, where you can compost these cards and put them on a scoring pile and basically do away with the abilities on the cards themselves. And within the cards themselves, there is a lot of forward planning, doing things in the right order, knowing which cards you can hold on to, which are going to synergize with each other, knowing which ones to get rid of. And all this time you are working towards so many different objectives going on at the same time. So you have public objectives like these here, where you want to be the first player to achieve that and get more points than the people who follow you. You've also got kind of objectives that are not based on a sense of urgency, but will score you points at the end of the game. You've got personal objectives, which are on your own player sheet, personal abilities, powers, and so on. So every game here feels very different because you're always aiming towards different things, and the variability in terms of the setup is absolutely huge. I believe there are thousands of combinations that can pop up just through randomization, which again will completely dictate the feel of the game and might change the way you approach it. So yeah, it's all in all, it's a very again, a game that gives you a lot of positive feedback. That piggybacking mechanism of following up on other actions it offers a very satisfying experience with lots of positive feedback, lots of options, and even conflicting things that you need to consider, because sometimes one objective might work against another objective, and some of the cards themselves have objectives based on the orientation of the grid itself. So some might say, well, you get X amount of points if it's adjacent to this card, or if you have these particular types of cards in a particular row or column, you'll get more points, which adds again more conflict into the different things going on. And it's all about squeezing as many points as you can out of the game as possible. Now, that being said, I do think at times, especially if you're playing with less seasoned gamers who haven't played so many games, the amount of information that's thrown at you can feel overwhelming at times, because sometimes you just have a huge hand of cards and you just don't know what you want to do. So bear that in mind if you don't want to have so much information dumped to you at once. And another thing that's probably more personal is that sometimes I feel the game is a little bit loose at times. It feels like it's just giving you constant points, and it's quite difficult not to do well at this one. Now, I understand that if you're going to play it more efficiently, of course you're going to beat somebody who's not doing that. But sometimes I feel like I'm just playing cards because I can. I'm going to get a bunch of points anyway. I could have played this card to get an extra point or two, but am I that worried about it when you're going to score hundreds of points at the end of the game? So maybe for my own personal taste, I would have liked it to be a little bit of a tighter engine, and maybe the decision space a little bit more brought in. But I do certainly feel this is an enjoyable game, and I can certainly see why so many people have got so much out of it. So, these last couple of years, games like Arc Nova have done really well. For me, this is when I played this game, I was instantly brought back feelings of Arc Nova, but I think I prefer Earth. I think the gameplay is quite similar in terms of its quality, but I think the reasons I like Earth a bit more is because it is so much easier to set up. It's actually a really quick setup in this game. It plays a lot quicker. You're looking probably at least half the time in order to play this one, which is nice. So you get a lot of game played here in around 90 minutes maximum, which is always a good thing. And if you like games such as the aforementioned Race for the Galaxies or Terraforming Mars, Ares Expedition, there's a lot of games like that. I think this one is probably the best one out of the bunch. So that goes to show that it's a really good design. Now, for the the loosey-goosiness of it, I'm not sure if it's going to be a long-term keeper for me, but I certainly do not have any reservations to give it a recommendation. It's definitely going to get a chairman's commendation, and I can certainly see why it has been such a big hit for so many different gamers. And the final game I'm talking about today is Footprints by Chili Fox Games. This one accommodates 1 to 6 players and takes 30 to 60 minutes to play. Now, this actually reminds me of a game of years past, really. It's such a simple game and a simple concept where you will be trying to traverse this board made up of all these hexes and different terrain types. Now, you're going to start on the left-hand side of the board, and as the game goes on, generally speaking, you'll be going to the right-hand side of the board, and by playing these cards, which will let you move across different types of terrain. Now, you're going to get rewarded by reaching the far end quicker than your opponents, because if you do it faster, you are going to get more points. However, there is an incentive to do other things whilst en route, such as collecting these resources, unlocking these abilities on your player board, and even unlocking endgame scoring criteria, which can be a huge factor in determining who wins the game or not. Now, the cards themselves in this game are quite interesting because it will show you which terrain types you can go through. However, the amount of terrain types of that type you can go through is dictated by your own player board, which you'll be upgrading as the game progresses. So for example, you might be able to move through 2 of these ice spaces, but as the game goes on, you can up it up to 10 spaces. So you're really flying through that particular terrain type. But because the board is modular, you need to decide when to use those particular cards. But this game has something I don't think I've ever seen before, is that often on these cards you are given more than one terrain type, and you can actually split them as you see fit. So it might say, go through your ice type, and then you can go through one grass type, and then carry on with your remaining movement on your ice type. So you can actually subdivide those cards, which can be quite difficult to track, but I do think mechanically speaking, it's a really interesting concept. And it's an interesting decisions to try and map out, especially because each card in this game has a dual purpose, because not only can you use it for the movement itself, you can discard that card and up your engine on usually another terrain type. So there's a bit of give and take here. Which cards you want to keep hold of in order to move, which cards you want to discard with hope of moving on a different terrain type a bit later on. And because the deck in this game is so finely balanced, those decisions can really matter and can determine whether you're going to reach the end of the track or not. So I do love that consequence of your early actions really mattering in your later actions, and you always feel that you're moving forward here and building your engine up. But again, the sense of urgency is important because you want to get to certain spots before your opponents do. So I generally like games that have a race aspect to them, but that race aspect isn't the be-all and end-all in the game. And you do actually have free reign to do different approaches here, because although, again, the race aspect is a big part of the game, I've seen players win this game without making the end at all, or even getting anywhere near it. So again, you're not pigeonholed to do what the game tells you to do. You can win in lots of different ways. Here, there's some good variability as well, as not only is the track modular, you have variable endgame objectives, which just plug into the board itself, and again will massively change the way that you approach the game. And each player is also given a unique set of cards which only you will have in that game, which will give you quite a game-breaking power, and all of those are really interesting in their own right, and you'll just kind of have to take my word at face value concerning that. So yeah, I like the forward planning here, mapping out your hand, not being overwhelmed by decisions, but still having interesting decisions to make. Because you only have a small hand of cards at any time, sometimes you might be forced to take a route that you weren't really planning to do so, simply because you do not have the cards in your hand in order to do exactly what you want. So that actually helps the game rather than hinder it, because again, you have to work with what you have and make some tactical decisions as well as strategic ones. There's also some kind of a more short-term sacrifice for long-term gain in terms of hitting these fire tokens. So sometimes you might want to divert off track and collect these fire cards, which will really give you powerful options to piggyback off your simple basic actions as well. So again, very pure game here. Just play cards, move along the map, and collect things along the way. Deposit things on the map to get your engine built up, and hopefully reach the end as well and unlock an end game scoring bonus. And that sense of urgency does shine through because everything is scarce here. If you and your opponent are both going for the same end game objective, then you want to be making sure that you are moving a lot quicker than your opponent does. I think the thing that really impresses me most about this game is how delicately those decks are balanced. Just the perfect amount of movement cards of each type to reach the end if you play well enough. Maybe make a few stops on the way, but you're not going to have that much leeway. So, unlike Earth, this game is not loosey-goosey. This game is very precisely engineered to not make you achieve too much, but still give you the option to achieve enough to feel satisfied. Now, my one real nitpick of this game is the fact that you do have these objective cards that you can try and achieve throughout the game, which will score you a healthy amount of points should you wish to take that route. Now, it does have that ticket to ride mechanism where if you do not complete them, you will suffer negative points, which is fine. But the thing I don't like about that is the fact that through sheer luck, you could end up drawing a card that you'll instantly be able to achieve and score quite a healthy amount of points. So I call that the kind of Takanoko syndrome, where you've already achieved the objective card that you've yet to draw, and that could be enough to win the game or not, because it's not a terribly high-scoring game anyway. But this one, despite those small nitpicks, it really did impress me. I'm quite surprised this one's flown under the radar to the extent that it has, because I know that some of these designers are quite well regarded and well respected. But maybe it's more muted look and more throwback style mechanisms that aren't exactly, high energy. They're not big or boisterous mechanisms that grab a lot of gamers' attention now. These are a lot more subtle and a lot more kind of refined and a bit more kind of reined back mechanisms, but they're ones that really do appeal to me because it shows a certain design pedigree and a certain degree of being refined that really does impress me. So another one that I think is going to be a commendation for sure, another around a 7 out of 10 for me in regards to footprint. So, all in all, these 3 games have impressed me. These are 3 games that I don't hesitate to give 7 out of 10 ratings to, which, might not sound amazing, but to be honest, I rarely give 7 out of 10s out because I think those are the games that deserve attention and deserve praise. So hopefully you've enjoyed my review of these 3 very different strategy games from 2023. Really enjoyed playing these, and it goes to show that great games are still being made up to this date. Now, if you have enjoyed the video, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.